Imagine you're in a wooden box, about 3 feet long. You can't move. You can't make a sound. For 27 hours, this is your entire world as you mail yourself roughly 300 miles to freedom. That was the real-life story of Henry Box Brown, and it's just one of the most incredible escapes ever pulled off. History is packed with stories of people who refuse to accept their fate. Individuals trapped in the most desperate situations who decided that walls, guards, and even the laws of nature were just obstacles to overcome. When freedom is on the line, human creativity becomes an unstoppable force. These aren't just prison breaks. They're masterclasses in ingenuity, psychology, and sheer, unbreakable will. Today, we're breaking down the most unbelievable true tales of impossible breakouts that prove creativity is the ultimate key to freedom. From a man who literally boxed himself up and shipped himself to a new life, to Allied soldiers who built an entire aircraft inside a Nazi fortress. These stories will redefine what you think is possible. The story of Henry Brown begins not with a plan, but with a heartbreak so deep it would spark one of the boldest escapes from slavery ever recorded. Born into bondage in Virginia around 1815, Henry's early life was marked by the constant cruelty of the system. Still, he found a little bit of normal life. He worked in a Richmond tobacco factory, sang in his church choir, and most importantly, he was a husband and a father. He had married an enslaved woman named Nancy, and together they had 3 children, with a 4th on the way. In his heart, Henry held on to a fragile agreement he'd made with his wife's owner, a promise that their family wouldn't be broken apart. But promises meant nothing in the brutal math of slavery. In August of 1848, the unthinkable happened. Henry watched in helpless agony as his pregnant wife and 3 children were sold and marched away with 350 other souls, bound for a plantation in North Carolina. He would later write of the torment of being unable to even say a final goodbye. The loss shattered him, but in his despair, a new, radical idea took root. He would not remain a slave. He would find a way to be free. But how? The usual routes of the Underground Railroad were full of danger. Then, an idea, which he described as a whisper from God, came to him. Go and get a box and put yourself in it. It was an absurd, almost suicidal concept, but in that absurdity lay its genius. Who would ever suspect a human being was being shipped as freight? The plan was as simple as it was dangerous. Brown got help from 2 key collaborators, James Caesar Anthony Smith, a free black man, and Samuel Alexander Smith, a white shoemaker who, ironically, was a slave owner himself, but agreed to help for a fee. Together, they ordered a wooden crate. The dimensions were agonizingly small, just 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and 2.5 feet high. It was lined with coarse cloth, and Brown had only a small bladder of water and a tool to bore air holes. To get the day off work from the tobacco factory, he burned his own hand to the bone with sulfuric acid. On the morning of March 23, 1849, Henry Brown folded himself into the claustrophobic box. The lid was nailed shut, and the crate was addressed to the office of the Pennsylvania Anti-Slavery Society in Philadelphia. 300 miles away, the box was marked, "This side up with care." It was a plea that was violently ignored for most of the trip. What followed was 27 hours of pure hell. The box was tossed onto a wagon, a railroad car, a steamboat, back to a wagon, a ferry, and another train. For long, agonizing stretches, the box was handled roughly and placed upside down, the blood rushing to his head until he felt his eyes would burst. He was racked with pain, convinced at times that he was going to die. At one point, he heard two men wondering what could be in the heavy box. One suggested it was the mail. The other, thankfully, agreed, and they moved on. Every jolt, every sound from the outside was a potential discovery. After 27 excruciating hours, the box finally arrived in Philadelphia. It was delivered to the office of James Miller McKim, a leader in the city's abolitionist movement. A group of prominent abolitionists, including William Still, gathered around the crate, unsure if the person inside was dead or alive. One of them tapped on the lid and asked, "All right?" A faint voice from within responded, "All right, sir." With a saw and a hatchet, they carefully pried open the lid, and from what he would forever call his grave of slavery, Henry Brown slowly rose. He was drenched in sweat and disoriented, but he was a free man. Overcome with emotion, the first thing he did was sing a hymn of thanksgiving he had chosen in advance. His story of resurrection spread like wildfire. He became a star of the abolitionist movement, a living testament to the horrors of slavery and the unbreakable will to be free. To commemorate his journey, he adopted a new name, Henry Box Brown. He toured America and later England, sharing his story with a panorama illustrating the evils of slavery. Though he had to flee to England after the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 made him a target for recapture, he had already secured his legacy. He had done more than just escape. He had turned the very engines of commerce against the system of slavery itself, creating one of the most powerful acts of self-emancipation in American history. Brown's story is about the ingenuity of one man. But what happens when hundreds of brilliant minds are trapped together? Our next story takes us to the heart of Nazi Germany, to a prison camp designed to be escape-proof, where a group of Allied airmen cooked up a plan so ambitious it would become the stuff of legend. In the middle of World War II, near Sagan, Germany, stood Stalag Luft 3. Run by the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, this was no ordinary POW camp. It was a high-security facility built specifically to hold the most troublesome Allied airmen, the ones who had already tried to escape from other camps. The Germans took extreme precautions. The prisoner huts were raised on stilts to reveal any tunneling. Seismograph microphones were buried around the perimeter, and the ground itself was a deterrent. A loose, sandy soil whose bright yellow color would be an immediate giveaway on the darker topsoil. To the Germans, Stalag Luft 3 was escape-proof. To the thousands of Allied POWs inside, it was a challenge. The driving force behind the plan was Squadron Leader Roger Bushell, a captured RAF pilot known as Big X. A veteran of other escape attempts, Bushel had a deep-seated desire to disrupt the German war effort from inside the wire. He envisioned an escape on an unheard-of scale, not just a few men, but a mass breakout of 200 prisoners. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. They would dig 3 separate tunnels, codenamed Tom, Dick, and Harry. The thinking was that if one was found, the Germans would relax, assuming they'd foiled the only plan. What followed was one of the most organized and ingenious feats of engineering in military history, involving over 600 prisoners. The diggers, many of whom were Canadian miners in their civilian lives, did the back-breaking work. The tunnels were incredibly deep, 30 feet below the surface, to avoid the seismic mics, and tiny, just 2 feet square. They were shored up with around 4,000 wooden boards, taken from the prisoners' own beds. Getting rid of all that bright yellow sand was a massive job. This fell to the penguins, prisoners who filled long socks or small pouches in their trousers with sand. They'd then waddle around the compound, subtly releasing the sand in gardens or other areas to mix it with the surface soil. It's estimated they excavated around 80 tons of sand for Tunnel Harry alone. Meanwhile, other teams were busy. Forgers created hundreds of fake identity papers. Tailors skillfully altered military uniforms into civilian suits. An entire industry of gadget makers or factories emerged. They crafted compasses from melted records and magnetized sewing needles. They built air pumps from bedboards, hockey sticks, and powdered milk tins to get oxygen to the diggers. Electricians even tapped into the camp's power grid to install lighting in the tunnels, using over 1,000 feet of stolen electrical wire. A trolley system was built to shuttle men and sand along the tunnels, pulled by ropes. The whole operation was protected by a team of stooges who kept watch for German guards, nicknamed goons. They developed a complex system of signals to warn the workers of danger, allowing them to hide all evidence in seconds. The work was painstaking and dangerous. Tunnels collapsed. Diggers suffered from lack of oxygen. Then, in September 1943, Tom was discovered just as it neared completion. It was a devastating blow, but the committee didn't quit. They repurposed Dick for storage and focused all their efforts on Harry. By March 1944, Harry was finished. It stretched over 350 feet, reaching the woods just beyond the camp's fence. The night of March 24th, 1944, was set for the escape. But from the start, there were problems. The first man out discovered the tunnel exit was short of the tree line, leaving the escapees dangerously exposed in the snow. This slowed everything down. Instead of one man getting out every minute, it was taking far longer. Still, men began to emerge from the hole and melt into the darkness. But just as the 77th man was crawling out, a sentry spotted him. The alarm blared. The escape was over. In the end, 76 men had made it out. What followed was one of the largest manhunts in the history of the Third Reich. Hitler was personally infuriated. He initially ordered every recaptured man to be shot, but was persuaded to reduce the number to more than half. The Gestapo took control. Of the 76 who escaped, only 3 made it to freedom. 2 Norwegians, Per Bergsland and Jens Müller, reached neutral Sweden, and a Dutchman, Bram van der Stok, made it to Spain. The rest were rounded up. 50 of them, including Roger Bushell, were executed by the Gestapo, a brutal war crime. While it ended in tragedy for most, the Great Escape was not a failure. It tied up huge German resources and stood as a monumental act of defiance. The men of Stalag Luft 3 proved that even in the most secure fortress, the human desire for freedom could build a railway to the stars, even if it started 30 feet underground. If you're finding these stories as incredible as I do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe for more. These are more than just adventure tales. They're proof of what we can accomplish when pushed to the absolute limit. And this next one might just be the most legendary of all. There are prisons, and then there is Alcatraz. Perched on a rocky island in San Francisco Bay, the Rock wasn't just a prison, it was a symbol. It was the final stop for America's most notorious criminals, like Al Capone. In 1934, it became a maximum security federal penitentiary, built on one terrifying promise. It was inescapable. Armed guards, strict rules, and the cold, treacherous waters of the bay made any attempt seem like suicide. In its 29 years, there were many attempts, but officially, no one ever succeeded. That is, until the night of June 11th, 1962. The architects of this legendary escape were 3 inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. A 4th man, Alan West, was in on it, but would ultimately be left behind. Frank Morris was the mastermind, known for his exceptional intelligence, reportedly with an IQ of 133. He was a career criminal and a seasoned escape artist. The Anglin brothers were bank robbers with their own history of breaking out. When the 3 ended up in adjoining cells, the seed of an impossible plan began to grow. Their plan was a masterclass in patience, deception, and pure artistic genius, carried out over 6 long months. First, they had to get out of their cells. The concrete walls were thick, but Morris noticed the area around the ventilation grills was corroded by salt and moisture. This was their weak spot. Using stolen spoons and a makeshift drill made from a vacuum cleaner motor, they began to painstakingly chip away at the concrete. To cover the noise, Morris would play his accordion during the prison's music hour, perfect audio camouflage. To hide their progress, they crafted fake grills out of painted cardboard. Once the holes were big enough, they squeezed into a little-used utility corridor behind their cells. This corridor became their secret workshop. They climbed up pipes to the top of the cell block, where they set up a hidden spot to assemble their gear. The most ingenious part of the plan was fooling the guards during nighttime head counts. In their workshop, they created shockingly lifelike dummy heads. Using a mixture of soap and concrete dust for a flesh-like tone, they sculpted faces and glued on real human hair swiped from the prison barbershop. Tucked into their beds at night, these silent decoys were convincing enough to fool the guards peering into the dimly lit cells. While this was going on, another project was underway: building a boat. They gathered over 50 raincoats, stitching and gluing them together to form a 6 by 14-foot inflatable raft and life preservers. They used the heat from steam pipes to vulcanize the seams and make them watertight. They even fashioned wooden paddles and turned a concertina into a bellows to inflate the raft. On the night of June 11th, 1962, they were ready. They placed the dummy heads in their bunks and slipped through the holes in their walls. But their accomplice, Alan West, ran into a problem. The concrete around his vent wasn't fully removed, and he couldn't get out in time. Morris and the Anglins couldn't wait. They left him behind. The three men gathered their gear, climbed up to the roof, and shimmied down a 50-foot bakery smokestack. They climbed over two 12-foot barbed wire fences and finally reached the island's northeast shore. There, in a blind spot hidden from the guard towers, they inflated their makeshift raft and around 10 p.m. slipped into the dark, churning waters of the San Francisco Bay, vanishing into the night. The next morning, the guards made the shocking discovery. The alarms blared, and one of the biggest manhunts in FBI history began. But the men were gone. The FBI's official conclusion, after a 17-year investigation, was that they likely drowned in the bay's frigid waters. And that's where the official story ends. But the mystery? It was just getting started. Over the decades, tantalizing clues have kept the legend alive. Raft pieces and a paddle were found on nearby Angel Island. Footprints were seen leading away from the shore. The Anglin family has claimed to have received messages from the brothers. Most shockingly, in 2013, a letter surfaced, allegedly written by an elderly John Anglin, claiming all three men survived. The author said he had cancer and was willing to turn himself in for treatment. The FBI's analysis of the letter was inconclusive. Did they make it? Did three men, armed with spoons, raincoats, and pure genius, defeat the world's most inescapable prison? The U.S. Marshals Service still keeps the case open, and Morris and the Anglins remain on their wanted list. Their fate is one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. We've seen escapes by land and by sea, but our final story is about a plan to escape by air. From a castle so secure, the Germans thought it was impossible to crack. If Stalag Luft III was for difficult prisoners, Colditz Castle was for the incorrigibles. This imposing fortress, perched on a cliff in Saxony, was Germany's special camp for Allied officers who kept trying to escape from other prisons. The Germans figured Colditz was their ultimate solution. It was even said that Hermann Göring himself had declared the castle escape-proof. But putting the most creative and determined escapers all in one place had an unintended side effect. It created a university of escape artistry, and their final project was their masterpiece. The idea came from a British pilot, Bill Goldfinch, on a snowy day in 1943. Watching snowflakes from a high window, he noticed they were being carried upward by a strong updraft. A light bulb went off. What if they could use that updraft to build a glider and launch it from the castle roof? The idea was presented to the escape committee, and despite its sheer audacity, it was approved. Goldfinch and another brilliant pilot, Jack Best, were put in charge. The plan was a marvel of engineering under impossible conditions. Their secret weapon was a book found in the prison library, Aircraft Design. Using this as their guide, they designed a two-seater glider they nicknamed the Colditz Cock. It had a wingspan of 32 feet and was nearly 20 feet long, designed to carry two men silently over the river below. First, they needed a workshop. They found a remote attic above the castle chapel, completely hidden from the guards. They built a convincing false wall, sealing off a section of the attic. The Germans were used to looking for tunnels. They never thought to look up. A team of a dozen builders, the 12 Apostles, set up an electrical alarm system with stolen wiring to warn them of approaching guards. Next, materials. Every piece of the glider was scavenged from the castle. The main wing spars were made from stolen floorboards. The wing ribs were crafted from bed slats. The control wires that would operate the rudder were made from electrical wiring taken from unused parts of the castle. For the glider's skin, they used cotton prison sleeping bags. To make the fabric airtight, they created a sealant from boiled millet, a watery porridge they stole from the kitchens. The finished glider would weigh about 240 pounds. The final piece of the puzzle was the launch. The chapel roof would be the runway. They planned to build a 60-foot track out of tables. To get the glider up to its 30-mile-per-hour takeoff speed, they devised a brilliant gravity-powered catapult. A heavy metal bathtub filled with concrete would be attached to the glider with ropes and pulleys. When the tub was pushed off the roof, its rapid descent would yank the glider forward, launching it into the air. For over a year, construction continued in secret. The glider was built in sections, ready for launch in the spring of 1945. The team was ready. The machine, a testament to their breathtaking ingenuity, was complete. But the Colditz Cock would never fly. Just as they were finalizing their plans, in April 1945, American forces liberated Colditz Castle. The prisoners led the stunned U.S. soldiers up to the hidden workshop. There, in the dusty attic, sat a fully constructed glider, a symbol of defiance and genius that had remained hidden until the very end. Though it never made its intended flight, the glider's design was vindicated. In 2012, for a TV documentary, a team of engineers built a replica and launched it from the roof of Colditz Castle itself, using the same catapult method. It soared gracefully across the river and landed safely, proving beyond any doubt that the plan would have worked. The prisoners of Colditz had built a viable aircraft in total secrecy, right under the noses of their captors, proving that even in the most formidable prison, the human mind can always find a way to take flight. From the suffocating darkness of a wooden box to the ingenious tunnels of Stalag Luft 3, from the frigid waters of San Francisco Bay to the skies above a German fortress, these stories all share one powerful idea. The men in these stories were locked away in places designed to crush the human spirit. But instead of giving up, they saw their confinement as a puzzle to be solved. They turned spoons into digging tools, raincoats into a raft, and bed slats into the wings of a glider. They used creativity and meticulous planning as weapons against steel and stone. These escapes remind us that ingenuity isn't just about inventing things. It's about reimagining the world around you. It's about seeing a path where everyone else only sees a wall. The unbreakable desire for freedom can push human creativity to its most extraordinary limits, proving that no prison is truly escape-proof when the mind itself remains free. Thanks for watching. If you want to dive into more incredible stories of human resilience, check out our video on the most amazing survival stories ever recorded. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next trip into the most fascinating corners of history. See you in the next one.